Mark Kelly is on the short list of names being considered as running mates for Kamala Harris in the upcoming election. Kelly supporters argue that there is nothing cooler than an astronaut on the ballot.
And liftoff for the final launch of Endeavour, expanding our knowledge, expanding our lives in space.
As a NASA astronaut, Kelly was part of 4 space shuttle missions from 2001 to 2011, spending more than 54 days in space and covering 22 million miles. Time featured Mr. Kelly and his twin brother Scott in a series called A Year in Space, following Scott as he spent a year aboard the International Space Station, allowing scientists to examine the differences in physical health between 2 genetically identical people. But time in space has never been a surefire win with American voters. While Mr. Kelly is already a senator from Arizona, 3 other astronauts have run for and attained high office, and 2 others fizzled before they ever reached electoral orbit.
Roger, backup clock is started. Roger, loud and clear, flight path is good. 6-9.
Far and away, the most successful astro-politico was Ohio Democrat John Glenn, who served 4 terms in the U.S. Senate after becoming the first American to orbit the Earth.
And when I was on top of that booster down there getting ready to go, it wasn't Star Trek or Star Wars, I can guarantee you that. It was representing the future of this country.
But it was not a straight line from space to the Capitol. After his first mission to space made him a national hero, Glenn was quietly pulled from the NASA flight rotation after President Kennedy concluded that he could not risk Glenn's life on a second mission.
It requires physical and moral stamina to equal the stresses of these times and a willingness to meet the dangers and the challenges of the future. John Glenn, throughout his life, has eloquently portrayed these great qualities.
Chafing at the role of ground pounder, Glenn resigned from NASA and retired from the Marine Corps in 1964, setting his cap for the U.S. Senate. Barely a month into his campaign, however, he took a fall in an empty bathtub while trying to repair a mirror, suffering inner ear damage and a serious concussion. Glenn pulled the plug on that campaign. He tried for the Senate again in 1970, losing to Ohio businessman Howard Metzenbaum, who himself went on to lose in the general election. In 1974, Metzenbaum and Glenn faced off again, and this time, after a decade of trying, Glenn prevailed. He was helped in no small measure by a case of flagrant political malpractice when Metzenbaum accused the astronaut and war hero of never having held an actual job. In their next debate, Glenn recited his record in World War II and Korea, along with his 149 combat missions. He also invoked the deaths of men less fortunate than himself, including astronauts Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee, who perished in the Apollo 1 spacecraft fire on January 27, 1967. Over his 24 years in the Senate, Glenn served as chairman of the Committee on Government Affairs. He also served as a member of the Foreign Relations and Armed Services Committees and participated in more than 9,500 roll call votes. But his career was not without its blemishes. In 1984, he joined a crowded field of Democrats, taking on the suicide mission of running for their party's presidential nomination to face the immensely popular Ronald Reagan in the November election.
It's because your administration gave us 21% interest rate, 17% inflation rate.
Glenn finished 5th in the Iowa caucuses and near the back of the pack in New Hampshire and on Super Tuesday, and was out of the race by March. Nevertheless, he ran for and won a 4th term in 1992 before deciding to retire at the end of that term. In a conversation I had with him in 1998, he said there was much he would miss about the Senate, but not the ritualized humiliation of constant fundraising, which he described as a stinking, miserable way to run your life. In October 1998, Glenn capped his career with a second trip to space aboard the Space Shuttle Discovery. At 77, he was and remains the oldest person ever to fly in space.
I was strolling on the moon one day in a merry, merry month of December. Now, May.
Astronaut Harrison Schmitt did not have the storied political career Glenn enjoyed. A geologist before becoming an astronaut, he became the 12th out of 12 men to set foot on the moon during the mission of Apollo 17 in December of 1972. In 1976, he ran as a Republican for a Senate seat in New Mexico. He easily won his primary contest and went on to trounce the Democratic incumbent, Joseph Montoya, winning 24 of the state's 32 counties. But the good times were short-lived for Schmitt. He lasted just a single term in the upper chamber, during which he served as chairman of the Science, Technology, and Space Subcommittee. He lost his re-election bid to State Attorney General Jeff Bingaman, who charged that Schmitt had not sufficiently attended to the needs of New Mexicans and asked pointedly, "What on earth has he done for you lately?" Not enough, New Mexicans decided, turning Schmitt out by a count of 54% to 46%.
Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here.
Flight guidance.
Go guidance.
We've had a hardware restart. I don't know what it was.
Okay. Houston, we've had a problem.
For Jack Swigert, things were even tougher, as bad luck seemed to stalk his career. Both of his careers, actually. In 1970, he served as command module pilot aboard Apollo 13, the mission that was aborted when an explosion crippled the mothership when the crew was 200,000 miles from Earth. Swigert and his crewmates Jim Lovell and Fred Hayes barely escaped, but made it home safely. In 1978, Swigert ran for a Senate seat in Colorado, but was defeated during the primary. In 1982, Colorado was awarded a 6th congressional district, one that encompassed Swigert's Denver home. He ran for the seat, but during the campaign, he was diagnosed with bone cancer. His diagnosis was made public, as was his doctor's prognosis that the disease was beatable. It wasn't. Swigert won, but on December 27, 1982, exactly a week before he would have been sworn in, he died. Today, a statue of Swigert in his Apollo 13 spacesuit, with his helmet held jauntily by his side, stands in Denver International Airport. Two other astronauts, Jack Lausma, who flew aboard Skylab and the Space Shuttle, and Jose Hernandez, another shuttle astronaut, ran for the Senate and House respectively. Both lost, and both retired from politics after that. Space and politics are high-stakes ventures with steep odds of making the professional cut. Mark Kelly knows that, at least as well as any of the people who preceded him in both fields. If Harris picks him and they win in November, Kelly will have risen higher than any other astronaut turned politician in American history. If he misses out on the Veep stakes, the popular lawmaker who won his 2022 election comfortably will at least have his Senate seat to keep him warm.